Hi there, everyone. So we're going to get right into, we're going to finish up the structures of the reproductive system, and then we're going to get into pregnancy. So this is going to be kind of a two-part lecture. So we'll finish this part up first, and we're going to talk about the mammary glands. Mammary glands are present in both males and females, but typically they're only functional in females. Mammary glands are a modified sweat gland, modified apocrine sweat gland, so those same sweat glands that you have in the axillary region and pubic region that produce that more thick, milky sweat. The function of mammary glands is to produce milk, and the function of milk then is to nourish the newborn. They're stimulated by sex hormones, and when they're stimulated, they increase in size, which also causes your breasts to swell when you're pregnant, which can also cause the pain or the more touchiness of the breast tissue. Hello, there we go. So this is what the mammary gland looks like. And here you can see a mammary gland filled with milk. So surrounding the nipple is an areola. The areola, when you're pregnant, becomes darker in color, as does the nipple. So the pigmented region gets darker, and we believe that is to help the newborn seek out that region where the milk is going to come from. So they are not able to see perfectly, but they can see and distinguish different colors. And so that's one of the things that they're able to do is see that nipple easier. Within the breast tissue, we have these lobes that contain the actual lobules that are filled with milk. And then you can see these little ducts that take the milk from the glands and bring it up to that nipple region. And so these are little alveolar glands where milk is produced. Women between the ages of, and I know that your textbook says 45, but in general, between the ages of 40 and about 55 years old, are going to be having mammograms on an annual basis to check for breast cancer. Breast cancer is one of the most common types of cancers, and it kills a lot of individuals. And the biggest problem, or I guess the worst thing about it, is we have ways to treat if we find breast cancer early enough. And so having a mammogram is going to allow you to, or will allow the medical doctors to look at the x-ray and determine if there is a lump, a cancerous tissue that they must remove early on before it spreads. Once you hit about age 54 to 55, then you're going to be able to go about every 2 years without having a mammogram. And some people will have to have mammograms earlier than that, earlier than age 40, if they have breast cancer, if it runs in their family. So this is mammography machine, and this is what an actual mammogram film looks like. And so here you can see a cancerous tissue. Here is normal. And if they see this, they can remove it without any problems. So at this point, you should be able to tell me what mammary glands are, what the parts of the mammary gland are that produce milk, the function of the areola, and what is a mammogram. So we're going to move on. Normally at the end, when I get to my study guide questions, I stop, but this would be a 5-minute video, and I think we can go a little bit longer. So we're going to go on into pregnancy now. So, what is pregnancy? Pregnancy is the time from when the sperm fertilizes the egg until the birth of the child. So, there are different periods during pregnancy. We have a period called the pre-embryonic period. We have the embryonic period, and then the fetal period. And so, pre-embryonic is before the embryo is produced. So technically, the first three weeks are pre-embryonic. Once we have produced that embryo at the end of week 3, then we are embryonic until the end of week 8, when we have formed the organ systems, and then we become a fetus. And in general, the gestation period is about 280 days, or 9 months from your last missed period. So here we start with this one single-celled zygote. At week 3, at the end of week 3, we have formed an embryo. So this period here is a pre-embryonic period. Now we form that embryo, and then from week 3 to week 8, we are forming all of the organs. So the embryo is 3 germ layer tissues. It's the endoderm, the mesoderm, and ectoderm. And hopefully you remember me talking about these 3 germ layers when we were talking about tissues, because those 3 germ layers are what make up all the organs of our body. So from the beginning of week 4 to the end of week 8, we are forming all of those organs. Now, all those organs will be mature. They're still going to be developing, but we're forming those organs. So by the end of week 8, we have a tiny little human that has undeveloped, or underdeveloped, I should say, organs that are still going to be maintained. Okay. So from the end of week 8, we are considered a fetus, and that is going to last all the way until we are born. So this is a week 12 fetus. So that first cell that we saw was the oocyte that was fertilized, so it was called a zygote. Oocytes typically are viable for up to about 24 hours. Sperm, on the other hand, are viable for a little longer than that. And so sperm, you can ejaculate into the female, and that sperm can last for 48 hours. So it can get up to the um, the fallopian tube and then just kind of wait. And if an egg comes along, the sperm are there immediately. So you don't have to wait until ovulation to have intercourse. You can actually have intercourse the day before ovulation, and the sperm will still be viable. So I love this picture. It's beautiful. When sperm reach the oocyte, so these sperm all get to the oocyte, and the joke is, the sperm are all fighting to see who can get in first, but really they work together. Sperm all work together. The acrosomal cap releases enzymes that help to break down that zona radiata, so that outer kind of cell structure that's protecting the egg. And one sperm will eventually make it through that outer region. And once it does, then no other sperm are going to be able to get in. And that one sperm that gets in, the nucleus of that sperm is going to stimulate the oocyte to finish its second meiotic division. And then both nuclei, the nuclei of the oocyte, the secondary, or the oocyte itself, not the polar body, and the sperm are going to come together, fuse together, forming the zygote. And so fertilization occurs when the genetic material combines. And so what happens after fertilization? Well, the first thing is we have that zygote. This is the first cell. And that first cell is going to move. So fertilization doesn't typically take place down here. It takes place up here around this area of the ampulla. And so we have that zygote. That zygote starts to undergo multiple mitotic divisions after about 24 hours. And by about day 4, it is a compact ball called a morula. That morula, and I think that's on the next page, continues and moves into the actual uterus. Once it hits the uterus, it is almost 100 cells or close to 100 cells, and it is known as a blastocyst. The blastocyst has different regions. So the blastocyst has an embryoblast and then a trophoblast. The embryoblast is what's going to become the embryo, and that's we're going to embed that into the endometrial lining. The blastocyst also secretes chemicals that keeps that corpus luteum working so it doesn't degenerate. So we have, like I said, we have a trophoblast, and then we have the inner cell mass, which is the embryoblast. And the embryoblast is going to become the embryo once it differentiates into the 3 germ layers. By about the end of week 3 is when that happens. And so here you can see that blastocyst moving in. Here the blastocyst has embedded in the endometrial wall. So we don't have a placenta yet, which means we're not feeding this embryoblast anything from our blood supply. It's going to actually use a yolk sac as its nutrients for the first few weeks. So here's that egg that comes in. It gets fertilized, like I said, around up here in the ampulla. And then once we have the zygote, we're going to then start at about hour 24, we start dividing, and we divide one cell into 2 to 4 to 8 to 16, 32, and eventually we have this large mass of cells called the blastocyst. And so you can see that there's the 3-day 16 ball cell, and then there's that blastocyst that's going to embed in this cavity or in the endometrial lining. So that blastocyst, the inner germ layer, or the inner ball of cells, the embryoblast, is going to differentiate into 3 germ layers: the ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm. The ectoderm gives rise to the epidermis and the nervous system. The mesoderm gives rise to a lot of all of our muscle tissue, all of our connective tissue, and a lot of our organs. And then the endoderm gives rise to the mucosal layer, multiple glands, a lot of our digestive organs, some of our reproductive and endocrine organs as well. And so here you see that embryo. So you have the ectoderm up here, the blue cells. We have this intermediate lining, which is the forming of the mesoderm, and then the forming of the endoderm down here. And so there's that whole structure. After implantation, the trophoblast of the blastocyst develops a chorionic villi. This is going to combine with the uterus and eventually it'll form that placenta. The placenta typically forms and attaches by about week 8. And so there's that placenta right there moving in. And here's that yolk sac that initially fed the embryo. So the placenta forms a barrier between mom and baby. It takes nutrients and oxygen from mom's blood and gives it to the baby, and takes waste products from the baby's blood and gives it to mom. It's kind of like an unfair trade. Um, and eventually it'll turn into an endocrine organ, or it takes the place of or it acts as an endocrine organ, um, and takes over for the corpus luteum at about week 8. So the corpus luteum can degenerate like it was supposed to. And at that point, it's going to produce a lot of those hormones that the corpus luteum has been maintaining in the system. So by week 8, all of the organ systems are formed. They're not all developed fully, so they have to still develop and they have to maturate. But by the end of week 8, we have all the makings of a human. Okay. And so at the beginning of week 9, we no longer are considered an embryo. We now are a fetus. And so this is a picture of fetal development. So you can see the baby growing inside of the amniotic sac, and here you can see the baby growing within the amniotic sac. So this table shows a lot of the changes that occur during development at week 8, by the end of week 8. So this is during that fetal or embryonic development. Now here we're at fetal development, weeks 13 through 16, 17 through 20, 21 through 30, and 30 through 40. So I'm not gonna, you can read through this yourself. I'm not going to read it to you. So at this point, you should be able to tell me what a zygote is. When does a zygote start to undergo mitotic divisions? What is a morula? What is a blastocyst? What hormone is produced by the blastocysts? What are the 2 major functional areas of a blastocyst? When does the blastocyst embed in the uterus? What is the function of the placenta? And what are all the organs of the body formed by? And I'm going to stop here because this is an 18-minute video, so that's pretty nice. And you went through 2 study guide groups, so I'll see you in the next video. Bye.